Hey there, Raiders. Jako here with my very first Raid Shadow Legends video. Now, because this is my first Raid video, I wanted to take a little bit of time here to introduce you to the channel and to explain to you why this channel is going to be a little bit different and unique than other channels you may have watched about this video game. The primary reason for that is because I am a free-to-play player. And I mean completely free to play. No money at all. So, all of the content on this channel is going to be by free to play, for free to play. You can also see up here that I am still pretty low level. I am just under approximately 60 days. I am at day 54 now. So, the content on this channel is going to be focused around the struggles and issues that the lower level free-to-play players have in the game. The guides will be focused on the best way to deal with situations that we run into as we progress leveling up our accounts and getting to the point where we are being able to run those higher level dungeons. As such, you're not going to see a whole lot of videos about the top 10 legendaries or the top 5 legendaries that will get you through a dragon's run in a minute or less. Things along those lines. Instead, you're going to see about team compositions I've put together to overcome the hurdles that I've run into in my game. As you can see here, I do not have the best of pulls. I mean, my only legendary here that I've managed to draw at this point is Gerptuk, who, at high end, from everything I've seen, is a very good champion. For me personally, he is not worth the investment of books. Shield Guard, on the other hand here, very likely a very good investment for me, and one I will be building up likely to 6 stars at this point. Now, that being said, the second reason that this channel is going to be very unique is that over my lifetime, I have acquired and hoarded a stupid amount of knowledge concerning arms and armor. Specifically in concerns to melee weapons and armor and such of days gone by. So, while I'm doing a champion review and things like that, I am going to take the opportunity to do a review on the aesthetics of the champion. So let me explain what I mean here on this. So let's take Tomb Lord for example. In general, when you look over Tomb Lord, he looks pretty cool. He's got a pretty nice kit. Nice articulated finger gauntlets here that have full vambraces attached. Might get a little bit in the way of his moving his wrist, but still pretty well protected there. He's got a nice, heavy, flanged mace, do a lot of damage. He's even got good greaves, shin protection, and thus. Now, where the problem comes in is in these pauldrons, this chest area here. These pauldrons are utterly ridiculous if you're going to be in any kind of real melee fight where people are using weapons along these lines. For example, if he looks left or right, he's going to see the inside of his pauldron. He's not going to see the enemy. He's not going to see what happens on the battlefield. In fact, a child could sneak up on this man with a stiletto and find nice little points back here to kill Tomb Lord with. And he'd never see it coming. Again, this little front piece here also cuts off any peripheral vision he has for anything below, essentially, his armpits. This area of Tomb Lord is terrible. Additionally, he would not be able to lift his arms above his shoulders without ramming those pauldrons into his own helm. He's going to have a serious headache at the end of a melee. Now, that being said, where does this knowledge come from? Why should you listen to me about these funny aesthetic idiosyncrasies that this game has? Well, that'll take a little bit of time. So as that's going, why don't I toss my people into a dragon run here, and while I'm talking, you can see that though I am not the fastest, I have been able to progress my team up to level 13, where I can pass it pretty much 100% of the time. And in this team, I've got Sepulchre Sentinel, Doom Priest, Frozen Banshee, my starter, Gaelic, and Coldheart, who is probably my best pull so far. So let's just toss them into multi-battle here as we talk about the rest of this. So, where did I get this wealth of knowledge? That started off one day when I was a child, when my parents decided that they needed to get rid of me for a weekend. So they tossed me into the hands of a friend who took me up to the mountains and introduced me to live-action role-playing. This became my life for quite a bit of time. Now, what is live-action role-playing? That's when a bunch of people who really like tabletop RPGs, such as Dungeons and Dragons and things along those lines, go ahead and make costumes, they make foam weapons, and they go up into the mountains, and they play essentially an adventure. Now, this can be a lot of fun. It's not your most accurate out there, but it gave me a love and an interest in creating those costumes and creating those weapons in particular that we used, making them look fancy and very fantastical. So, that's where it started. I had been an avid tabletop RPG player up to this point. I'd also been an avid video game player, starting with things like Fallout, going into Baldur's Gate, and video games along those lines. So, kind of mixed the two and became essentially a geek of geeks. And it comes right down to it. So, flash forward about 10 years, and I am now in high school. In high school, those things are pretty well frowned on from the time period I come from. So I got into Shaolin Kung Fu. Now, in Shaolin Kung Fu, not only do they study the 5 animal forms, but they also study weapon techniques, things like 3-sectional staffs or nunchaku, guandaos, straight swords as well as broadswords, things along those lines. This ignited in me a passion for dynastic Chinese culture, as well as the arms and armor of those time periods. And not just Chinese time periods, but to understand why the Chinese arms and armors were different, I had to also study the arms and armors of ancient civilizations around the world, from the Romans and their schooner shields to the Greek phalanx or the Gothic German full plate armor. So that became a passion of mine, something that I really enjoyed, and it actually inspired me to start an archaeology degree. So years pass, I have my bachelor's in anthropology with a specialization in archaeology, and all the research that went into that specialization was on ancient arms and armors. Yes, I specialized in China, I looked mostly there, but I had to look around the world as well, at all sorts of different weapons and armor that we use throughout history. So you've got all that going on. At about that same time, I met my wife. Now, my wife was part of a group called the Society for Creative Anachronisms, or the SCA. This group essentially tried to recreate the Middle Ages from about 1600s on back, the way they should have been. So no plague, no poor peasants dying in the streets, but nobles and knights and things along those lines. Now this Society of Creative Anachronism spans pretty much literally the globe at this point and has a huge following in the US. In fact, strange tidbit, they have the largest standing militia in the United States. Yes, it's with metal armor and sticks, but apparently it still counts. Now, a lot of people spend a lot of their time researching period and extant pieces of history, clothing, armor, those sorts of things, within this society, so they can do things as authentically as possible. What this meant for me is that I got to be involved in one of their sports called heavy combat, or heavy armored combat. To boil it down, what this was a situation where we would go out, we would put on metal armor, and we would pound the shit out of each other with sticks. The sticks were rattan. They were about 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches big, and the only way to measure whether or not you were alive or dead in a single combat or a melee combat was by your own armor, and whether or not you felt that the hit you just took would have been a fatal blow had the stick actually been a blade or a glaive or spear or whatnot. So, I got a lot of practical experience wielding weapons well in armor, and the sort of things that you see in fantasy that do not translate into good ideas for actual combat, such as those giant pauldrons on Tomb Lord. So, all of this culminates, and I get out of my degree, and I'm looking around the world, and I end up writing a fantasy book. I am a published fantasy writer at this point. You can find my links for my books in the tags below and everything, which is just fine. But on top of all this knowledge that I gained, now I'm looking at a fantasy setting and doing research on what is plausible at the same time interesting for a fantasy setting. So, all of that put together gave me a unique wealth of knowledge on a very specific subject: the arms and armor of ancient cultures and how they actually worked, how effective they were in combat. Given all of that, I decided that on this channel it would be a great idea to sit down and look at the champions, and while I'm doing the guides on their abilities and what artifacts and items and everything would be best to build them out so that you can progress in the game, also take a look at the graphics and whether or not these people could actually fight in what they're wearing, or whether or not they are a purely fantasy get-up and must use some kind of magic or other sixth sense or, I don't know, superpowers to do what they're doing. Now, just as an interesting note, if you look up into that corner, there's a picture of me in my SCA armor, probably about to get my ass kicked. That's how that happens. You come home with a lot of bruises and a few fractures occasionally, but it's all in good fun. So, now that the rambling, long-winded part of this is done, I wanted to say thank you and welcome to this journey that I have started, and I invite you to join me on this journey at looking at Raid Shadow Legends, both from a free-to-play, completely free-to-play perspective and the challenges that that has, as well as from a standpoint of the aesthetics, the graphics of the game. So thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you later on down the road in this journey. Have a great day. Enjoying the content? Remember to like, subscribe, and toll that bell.